This is In Deep. I'm Angie Coiro. When two environmental activists were injured in a car bombing, police and FBI filed charges against them. It was their bomb that went off, they said. It turns out they had their own agenda. Eventually, they paid big for that, but the question remains, who bombed Judi Bari? This hour, the new documentary of that name coming up on In Deep. As you might know, I am very active on Twitter. You can find me at Angie_Coiro if you care to. I've carefully selected tweeters to follow who meet the same credentials I look for in deep guests. They're smart, informed, thoughtful, and they're funny, usually. And it's not a deal breaker, but it goes a long way. Humor usually does. And you might be surprised that on my list, I have libertarians and I have Republicans too, as well as religious people. I don't ask that you believe what I do in order for me to listen to your opinions. I just ask that you express yourself with intelligence and respect. People who just mouth talking points, who clearly have no clue what's behind them, or people who engage in personal attacks, life is short. They get dumped. They get dumped fast. This week, with President Barack Obama's announcement that he personally has come around to accepting and endorsing gay marriage, I was astounded at the fallout on Twitter. These very people who pretty consistently display respect and grace, and most of them generally support for progressives, they took to bickering and slamming and blocking each other's access in a kind of storm I have never seen there. Now, in fact, this started the night before, when it was clear that North Carolina had joined too many other states in forbidding same-sex marriage, even invalidating some domestic partnerships already established along the way. And I was among the furious, and in my fury, I started a petition, which I have since taken down, by the way. The petition urged the Democrats to pull their fall convention out of Charlotte. The last thing I thought was appropriate now was for Democratic and liberal dollars to enrich the coffers of what has now declared itself a biased and bigoted state. Now, let me stop a minute to answer a question that might be forming in your mind. Why am I spending all this time talking to you about what happened over a small patch of time in a mini blogging service online most people don't even belong to? You might think that Twitter is a place to check in and say, gosh, I've got a cute dog, and post a picture, but it is in fact a universe you create for yourself. You set the bar for the caliber of conversation you want. And as any organization will tell you, Twitter users don't just reflect public conversation, they drive it. It was key to pushing out the story of Trayvon Martin. It is a venue so full of impact, it is a critical ingredient now in any public relations strategy. I'm talking to you about this today because what happened on Twitter and other places online I checked out for contrast was that people who'd up to now supported each other suddenly saw their colleagues as other, the enemy. Did I start a petition? No. I had allied myself with Karl Rove. I had issued threats. I held a boycott over their heads. I was telling people not to donate. The misinformation and the insults were flying like crazy. And drill down on this. People on the left urged me in some cases and demanded in others that I cease collecting opinions to give to the Democrats. And the next day, with Obama's announcement, the fractures were split open even wider. Formerly friendly tweeters were pilloried as one-issued voters. You liked what Obama had done? You're stupid. You don't realize how little it was. If you faulted him, I hope you were wearing a flak jacket. It got rough. Now, I wanted to know if I was overreacting. I wanted to weigh my vision against someone else's, someone who has Twitter down hard. So I rang up In Deep's own Gotta Laugh. She's got over 200,000 people following her online. Laffy, you observed the same unpleasantness, let's call it, on Twitter as I did. And I think the thing most disturbing to me was people on the left slapping each other around for their opinions on this.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I thought that this was one area where we could all unify. And I'm hearing everything from, oh, now everyone's going to think that it was Biden who pushed Obama into, and it's not true. And other people saying, oh, so now you're going to support Obama because he finally said something he already believed in. And I was like, no, he said he didn't believe quite yet, and he was evolving, and other people attacking the timing of it, and other people saying, oh no, this is really bad because Obama, he's going to lose voters now. I mean, this was all coming from the left, no, sorry, I disagree with just about all of that.
I do too, and I disagree. And like I said, the reason I wanted to kind of get this off my chest today was because I think we have to do better as the left. And what we demand from the other side, what I've always demanded on this show, is you can express your opinion. You have to express it decently and with respect. And I saw a breakdown in respect.
Yeah, I did too. And I have to say also that I was so touched by President Obama's the way he expressed it, and talking about family members and his daughters. And I have very close family members who are gay, and it means I was tearing up, literally tearing up, watching the reporting on this and watching the commentary and watching the president and everybody else and reading all the support. So yes, I think we need to be respectful. Remember, there's more people out there than just a president on TV who's not reading your tweets.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think that puts it in great perspective, and I'm glad I got your perspective on this. Thanks, girl. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
That's Gotta Laugh from thepoliticalcarnival.net, our regular commentator here on Indeed. So what's the point of all this? I guess I am asking for peace. We've got short months and a long haul before us to keep the White House out of Republican hands. I don't care if you don't like Obama or don't like him, whether you feel enough attention is being paid to his curtailments of privacy, whether you think he's carrying on Bush administration policies, say whatever you like, online and in person. But remember, there is a human being on the other end of your discussion. A human being who has the same basic principles as yours, who is just as eager for us to win in November as you. Don't talk to them like they're crap. Talk to them like you care about them. Because in these battles on our hands that really matter, we are all we've got. This is In Deep. I'm Angie Coiro. Last week, we talked here about the men accused of planning a bombing for Occupy Cleveland, about how things are not always as they seem, how, just as in the Vietnam protests, there are undercover members of federal and local agencies charged with soliciting violence from protesters. In their minds, it undermines the credibility of the people rallying. It paints the whole with the sins of the few. Fortunately, in this case, the FBI's culpability in the Occupy Cleveland incident rose to scrutiny immediately. In the case of this hour's subject, it was not nearly so straight a road. May 24th, 1990, Earth First environmental activists Judi Bari and Daryl Cherney were driving through Oakland headed for Santa Cruz when their car exploded. And before the incident was even hours old, a fog dropped over the facts. The bomb was under the driver's seat. No, it was in the back seat. Police on the scene initially had one version, then the FBI showed up and another version emerged. And suddenly, the victims were to blame for their own bombing and were taken into custody. Years have passed. Judi Bari has since died of cancer, while a lawsuit against police and FBI was still in the courts. And even though her estate and her friend Daryl Cherney won the case, the FBI still refuses to release key evidence, and the question remains unanswered. Who bombed Judi Bari? That's the title of a new documentary currently on the festival circuit, where it has just nailed the Best Feature Documentary at Desert Rocks Fame and Best Documentary at the Davis Film Festival. It's our topic this hour on In Deep. Joining me via Skype from Southern California is Liz Thomson, director of Who Bombed Judi Bari. Liz, hi.
Hi, it's great to be here.
I'm really glad you're here. Thanks. And equally glad to have in the studio one of Judi Bari's friends and a consultant to the film, Karen Pickett. Hi, Karen.
Hi, nice to be here.
It's good to have you here. Let me ask, you were physically present for this bombing. I'm going to take you back a little bit before that, and then we'll walk through the story of the bombing. You knew Judi Bari since you both ended up together in the Bay Area Coalition for Headwaters. You met her at the Headwaters protests in 1988. Tell us a little bit about her as a person.
Well, we were both working on the Headwaters Forest campaign. She was actually living in Mendocino County, up in Ukiah, and she later lived in Willits, and I was in the Bay Area. So we worked very closely together, but we were, miles apart. But when the campaign got hot and heavy, we talked on the phone nearly every day. I met her in 1988 when she was first getting involved in Earth First, and we became quick friends. We were the same age, and we just connected really well. We were both, hardcore organizers, just ready to go, and we worked very well together. So we, the Headwaters Forest campaign also went on for 20 years. So, it was really a historic campaign that just employed the whole very broad range of tactics. We worked with labor. We used a lot of direct action. We had tree sits. We had rallies. We lobbied in Congress. We lobbied in the state legislature. And the year that the Judi was bombed, 1990, we were actually launching one of the more ambitious campaigns of the larger Headwaters Forest campaign, which was Redwood Summer. And the whole idea was that this campaign needed to go national. We needed greater visibility because we were fighting this huge corporation, one of the worst corporate raiders in the U.S., Charles Hurwitz, head of Maxam Corporation, who had taken over Pacific Lumber. And so that was the strategy idea behind Redwood Summer, which was largely Judy's brainchild, was to do organizing mostly on college campuses and just bring hundreds or maybe thousands of people to Northern California for the entire summer, set up base camps, and have a summer of civil disobedience. It was modeled on civil rights campaigns, specifically Mississippi Summer. And it was the very beginning because this was the end of May. And Redwood Summer did go on, although, of course, under very different circumstances.
Mary Liz, Judi was known for her work trying to save the great redwoods. There was clear cutting happening. There was unhealthy harvesting of wood happening up there. And the area that Karen has just described is beautiful, ancient forest that has repeatedly been attacked by the lumber companies. And when I say attacked, I'm picking that word carefully because there are ways to go in and harvest lumber more sustainably, and there are ways to go in there uncaringly and with just a rapacious taking, and that's what was happening there. You as a director were gifted with so much footage, and that effort that you had to make to let us know who Judi was and how she worked and how the campaigns up there worked. You could document a lot of that by looking at the film there. Who shot all that footage, and why was there so much of it?
Well, there really is a unique combination of footage from over a huge time span of years, from the early 80s all the way up through the current case still going on now. And probably around 20 different videographers are represented in all that footage, including myself. And people followed around these events at the time and all the way through because they did want the public to know that it was so drastic, like you said, the attack on the redwoods. And the people that lived there, I think they were just so motivated to show the world what was really going on because it really was drastic. And the clear cutting was unbelievable. And they would just leave a couple trees by the road. And then, you go in 10 feet and it's just completely dirt and scarred hillside. So that kind of climate, it was happening so fast, led to, I think, a lot of people trying to document it. And I myself was one of them. Judi and Daryl were coming to the Bay Area, and I met them in late 89 and 1990 when they were trying to let people in San Francisco know what was happening with the redwoods and what was coming up with Redwood Summer. So when the bombing happened, I knew them, and I knew it was an attack on people who were being taken down for speaking out,
Yeah. I want to give our listeners who are outside of California and outside the Bay Area a quick geography lesson, just so you know the areas we're talking about. San Francisco is south of the Mendocino forests by a couple of hours, and Oakland, where the bombing took place, is east across the bay from San Francisco, so you know how this story is taking place. Something you brought up, Mary, and Karen, since you were working with people there too, I'd like to get both of your points of view on this. It's easy to say, well, this was the loggers versus the environmentalist. And I, as a more casual news consumer in those days, I had the feeling everybody up there hated the environmentalist. And that was not the case. I mean, not only at the time, but in subsequent interviews, there are people who show up who felt that what Hurwitz was doing up there worked against their own interests. And that's something that Judi eventually capitalized on. Karen, you want to take that?
Yeah, well, it's something that the workers, many of the workers anyway, over time came to see that Charles Hurwitz was somebody who was treating his workers the same as he was treating the forest. At the same time when he came in and bought this formerly family-run company, Pacific Lumber, that had been logging fairly sustainably for 100 years. You could walk in the forest in an area of old growth, and it was residual old growth, but they took out so few trees per acre that it was still intact forest, and the species were still there. And everything changed so radically overnight when he took the company over. He nearly tripled the cut, but he also downgraded worker safety standards, where in some cases there were 2 people 2 logger teams sent out into the woods. There would be one person, and there are many examples that are like that. And logging is a really dangerous job, and mill work is a really dangerous job.
Too, their pension fund as well. He rated that.
Right. He raided the pension fund during the takeover. So, he did not he was in it for the short term. And after he had cut as much of the old growth as he could and made as much money as he could, he did get out. But what he left in his wake is just, unbelievably devastating. But it was a hard road to build these bridges with the workers, and there was a lot of hostility that was promulgated amongst the workers. But it was coming from the corporation. It was coming from the bosses. And in the course of the summer, things were happening like phony press releases and phony flyers saying, well, Earth First is going to come in and take away your jobs, and they're going to carry out violent campaigns. And there was a little bit of precedent for that, Mary. Let me take this over to you, because there had been monkey wrenching in the past. There had been spiking of trees in the past. And this was a philosophical change in how to reach people in trying to save the redwoods. There was a lag there. There was a time when this thing was acceptable to the activists, and then when it wasn't. And the people didn't necessarily know what the truth was at the moment.
Well, I think it's different, the tension that arose with the Redwood Summer coming. That was obviously the kind of direct actions that were going on for the most part were nonviolent. The monkey wrenching was really more of an attitude than actual stuff, although there were some things. And the tree spiking that did injure someone was not an Earth First tree spiking. But when it did end up injuring someone, there was a shift that, tree spiking was meant so that they wouldn't cut the tree. They'd paint an S on it so that they wouldn't even use their equipment. When something was cut and a logger got injured by it, that was, later led to Earth First denouncing tree spiking as a tactic. But it was really seen, it was used in a few places, and maybe in some areas it did work to stop for a while they could use other legal actions or things like that. So I think there's a difference between that kind of occasional thing that was going on and the tension of violence that was being stirred up on purpose, as if the protesters were going to be violent. They were sitting in trees and blocking bulldozers and, handcuffing themselves to things and getting arrested. I mean, it was really, the nonviolent thread to it was always there and very prominent, and especially as it grew into Redwood Summer. And Judi really pushed that. You can't have a huge mass mobilized movement without really being respectful about what that means to have a nonviolent movement. And it works, and that's what did work.
We're talking this hour about a new documentary that is out and currently on the festival circuit. It's called Who Bombed Judi Bari. Our topic this hour on In Deep with the director, Mary Liz Thomson, and an environmental activist who worked alongside Judi Bari and consultant to the film, currently with the Bay Area Coalition for Headwaters, Karen Pickett. Stick around for more. You're listening to In Deep. We're online on Facebook, In Deep with Angie Coiro.
It's quitting time. It's quitting time on that high-tech plantation. It's quitting time. It's quitting time on that old high-tech plantation. It's quitting time for good. It's quitting time. It's quitting time. It's quitting time on that high-tech plantation. It's quitting time. It's quitting time on that old high-tech plantation. It's quitting time for good. Enslaved by a way of life propped up by lies, but some of us have come to see things through different eyes. Tomorrow
That's music from the documentary Who Bombed Judi Bari. I'm talking to two of the filmmakers, and it's picking up awards as it moves around the country. There are dates that you can find on the website. In fact, it's going to be in Central California along the coast. It's at whobombedjudibari.com, and you can check out their full schedule there and their growing list of awards as well. Whobombedjudibari.com. Judy and Barry both end in I. Let's talk a little bit about that music we were just hearing, because I had mentioned that there's so much footage of what was happening up in the Redwoods, and so much of it in the form of protest music. Karen, what was the role of music in the life of Judi Bari?
Well, Earth First in general employs music a lot, as well as direct action, music and humor, and I think that that's one of the reasons that Judi really gravitated towards Earth First and determined that for her it was a good fit. She was a musician, she was a fiddle player, and she had an incredible sense of humor. She kind of saw the irony and laughed at everything. At the same time, she's a brilliant strategist. It's not that she didn't take these issues seriously, but I think when you're dealing with such dire circumstances, when the fabric of the planet is literally being killed, and you go out into the middle of the clear cut, and it's just smoking hot where it used to be cool and moist with lizards and salamanders. I think that it's very difficult to not despair. And so one of my favorite banners that we made in Earth First is that direct action is the antidote to despair. And so is laughter, so is humor. And so when we were out, the direct action takes people out in the streets, out in the woods. We're interfacing with the public and other people. We're not in offices doing our work. We're not in the halls of Congress lobbying. So the music and the humor, I think, bring people in and allow your message to be delivered in a way that they can hear it. So it really works, and is part of the effectiveness of that kind of organizing, I think.
The bombing also happened when Daryl and Judi were on a musical roadshow tour for Redwood Summer. And in fact, they were about to head to Santa Cruz to play a show there. And we're going to be screening our film in Santa Cruz this weekend, tomorrow night at 6:30 there. So we're excited about that. And it was the place she was about to go next, right before the bombing happened.
Well, let's talk about the bombing. And Karen, you were not there on the moment, but you were there pretty darn quickly afterward and played a role in the hospital after that. What did you see when you arrived on the scene?
Well, I was close by. I was at my job at the Ecology Center in Berkeley, and I got a call, and we knew next to nothing at that point except that, a bomb had exploded. Judi and Daryl were in the hospital, and I just dashed out the door and went to Highland Hospital, and there were very shortly after that, crowds of people started to arrive, and the crowds just grew and grew. But at that point, there were only police there, Oakland police and FBI. And Judi was in emergency surgery, and so I was talking to the medical personnel to find out how badly she was injured, because I figured if they'd taken her right in for surgery, then and a bomb had exploded, that this was this was very serious, and it was a little difficult to get information, but that was what I was trying to do. And then I was approached by the FBI, and they said that they wanted to go downstairs with me and ask me some questions. And at that moment, that made sense to me because, I don't interact with the police necessarily in a friendly way much of the time because I'm a political activist, but a bomb had just exploded. This is what the police are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to ask questions, and that's the way that they figure out what had just happened. So I went downstairs with them, and they started asking me questions, and the one thing that I did say to them was I said, look, you guys are from down here in Oakland, the Bay Area. Judi is from Mendocino County, and we're working on this campaign. And you probably don't know that as we approach this summer of direct action up in the Redwoods, the situation has been heating up, and there have been a lot of threats, including death threats, and Judi has been the primary target. So that's the direction that you guys should look in right away. And oddly enough, they didn't seem that interested in that information. And then they started asking me personal questions about myself, and I just kind of lost it and said, this is not relevant. I want to go back upstairs and see what I can find out about my friends. And they took me into custody and took me down to the Oakland police station instead of letting me go back upstairs.
They took you into custody saying what? You're charged with something? You look suspicious?
No. Well, they said, we want to take you downtown. And, it's like Dragnet on TV. And I said, no, I don't want to go downtown. And they said, well, we're going to take you downtown. And I said, am I under arrest? And they said, well, no, but you will be unless you go with us.
Well, that's effective.
So I had no choice. But they, interestingly enough, when they took me down to the Oakland police station, they made the mistake of putting me in a locked room with a telephone. And I called KPFA radio station and went on the news live. And even though, we hardly knew anything. I said, something horrible has just happened, and on top of that, something is horribly wrong by the way the aftermath is unfolding.
Well, in fact, Mary, if you want to pick this up from here, Mary Liz, this is where things immediately started falling apart. Toward the latter part of your film, in fact, you even indicate one of the earliest police officers on the scene noted the position of the bomb. The position of the bomb appears to have been underneath the seat. The pictures that you show us and that are in the archival footage, that's a front seat that blew up, but the FBI got there and suddenly the bomb moved to the back.
And all that came out in discovery with the trial, where they could really document that progression. And Judi did a great job of explaining it, how the first officer on the scene is really writing down what he actually sees, and then as soon as the FBI comes, he's being told the bomb went off in the back seat. They were trying to establish that it was out in the open, that they should have known it was there. That was the whole reason that was important to them, that it had been in the back seat. So that would have made it easier to blame it on them, and was so obvious that it wasn't. So that when the photos were released and they were the FBI's own photos, it was pretty shocking, because it's so implicating of them, of how could you look at that and say the exact opposite, So it was that kind of thing. The details of this case are pretty unbelievable, and the extent that they went to and that people went to, and to fabricate evidence, to lie about evidence, to try and frame them, when these were people who really are the reason why we still have redwoods, and that's why it's important. That's why it's an important story, because they stood up, and it was difficult, it was bittersweet, it was tragic, not everything was won, but a lot was won, and these people were finally held to task. It's not done yet. Who the bomber really was has never been established, but at least part of the story was, people are not going to put up with this. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of, history that I think people need to be aware of, and you start to see what you were just talking about with the current activism with Occupy, and you need to see the power of this that you do have, and I think it's inspiring. I hope that it inspires and helps people in the current climate of activism feel part of that thread, and I know Judi would just be so inspired by Occupy today as well.
That's Mary Liz Thomson, who's director of Who Bombed Judi Bari. Karen Pickett is here in the studio with us as well, consultant to the film. One of the best things about the film is that we get to practically meet Judi Bari, and you framed it, Mary Liz, you framed it around a deposition that was taken, and she was filmed throughout. We see her lying down. She did die of breast cancer not too long after that, and she's obviously a woman who's quite ill, but she's telling her story very concisely, very plainly. And we also hear from her in other footage, and here she is talking about that location of the bomb. I want people to hear not only the words she's saying, because we've already said that she insisted accurately it was in the front seat, but listen to the passion and energy she's speaking with.
their investigation, their whole thing was based on lies from day one. Their initial arrest of me and Daryl was based on a sworn affidavit from that sergeant, etc., that said the bomb was in the back seat, therefore they should have seen it, therefore they knew they were carrying it, and they're guilty of transporting explosives. When in fact, the bomb was under the seat. I know it was under the seat. I felt that thing blow up. I know exactly where it was.
In the end.
I know exactly where that was. I mean, that's a woman who's not going to be toyed with. And in fact, Karen, we also see footage of her not too long after the accident, within, I think, 3 months, if I remember correctly. She's out there in a wheelchair at a rally.
Right. It was a rally at the FBI headquarters at the federal building in San Francisco. And because we had to go and, rally on their doorstep and yell at them, and that never stopped. It's never stopped until today. We've taken them to task, and the fact that we won the civil lawsuit in 2002 was tremendous. It was historic. It was really unprecedented because people don't win lawsuits against the FBI. They have a tremendous amount of immunity for people to even get legal actions into court, and they were found to have violated the First and Fourth Amendment rights of Judi and Daryl. And because of that, and because of the historic significance, and because it's still an unsolved case, those are some of the primary reasons why it's such an important story. And it's a story that we've all told so many times, but Judi tells it best. Judi and the archival footage, and it's still very relevant today. And I would recommend everybody to find a showing near them. It's playing in San Jose today at a labor film festival, and in Santa Cruz tomorrow. There's a showing at the Labor Fest in San Francisco this summer in July, but there'll probably be more that'll pop up in the Bay Area and elsewhere. And so really the way to find out is to go onto the website, whobombedjudibari.com, because the schedule is updated every day, and it's phenomenal.
It's a very good. It's a very good film. It was educational. By the way, I want to underline something. Some of our listeners hear this on a delayed basis, so rather than the references to today and tomorrow, which are relevant for some and not for others, I do want you to go to the website and check for a listing near you. Mary Liz, as a director, you have to consider who's going to see this film, who you're talking to, and for me, as I mentioned, I was a much less political, much less media savvy person when I first heard this story, when there was a bombing and they said it was God forgive me, my thought was, geez, these violent activists make us all look bad, and here they are blowing themselves up now. And I wonder how many people like me you're talking to with this film.
Oh, a lot of people like you. And I think that a lot of people just kind of walked away with that impression, and it was so easy because they were smeared in the media, and that's kind of the point of how egregious their actions were, because not only did they accuse them and drop the charges, but they smeared them. And so I'm constantly amazed at how many people tell me, wow, it doesn't even matter what your politics are. You just can't believe what they did to this woman and what they were doing to the forest up there. And, I've had people of all stripes tell me things like that about the movie, and just how powerful it is to see Judi and Daryl stand up, and other people in the forest movement who did that, who really stood in front of bulldozers and stuff, and we're just not going to let that kind of destruction of the whole ecosystem just happen without anybody trying to stop it. So I think it's a great, inspiring story that teaches a lot of complex things, and I love the way that there was sort of the horizontal, non-hierarchical outlook. People were all involved. There were no leaders. People were taking responsibility for their own behavior and actions and trying to be a good citizen, a good, what I would call people who care about society and the earth and standing up and doing something. And so I've had a lot of young people tell me, too, how they don't get to see, especially young women. I had a assistant editor who was younger, who felt like this kind of role model is hard to find where do we go with activism? Where is it going to go? They're trying to understand how can we impact some change on climate change and things like that. And you do need to have a little bit of a long-term perspective and realize it does take time, but look how far you can come, and look what you can do, and keep,
And that goes to why it's so relevant today. I mean, it's interesting because this film was, it's 22 years after the bombing, and this many years, after we won the court case, and it took years to make. At the same time, I think that the timing couldn't be better for the release of this film because there's so many parallels. The cross-movement organizing that Judi did because she came from labor organizing, and this is what Occupy is trying to do.
Right.
And so it's not something that's just in our history that people can look back on. It's relevant to today's organizing in so many ways.
In fact, Mary Liz, you show, we've only got a couple minutes left in this segment, but you show the way that Earth First managed to work hand in hand with local tribes, because not only was this an issue of the trees that belong to all of us being torn down, in some cases these people were tromping on sacred land in violation of the treaties at hand. It's interesting to know that fact, but it's also interesting to watch how politically savvy it is for those two groups to work together.
Yes. I love the way that plays out, and that we got a chance to be able to show that with some of the footage of Andy Caffrey, who was the videographer on a lot of that. But that was a very interesting case of how those came together. And the Native American population up north, there was a lot of interaction with Earth First as well, and many other, actions, and the International Indian Treaty Council in San Francisco as well. They were deeply aware of what was happening and involved as well.
Let me ask you first, Mary Liz, and then after the break, I'm going to ask Karen the same thing. We don't know who bombed Judi Bari. There's speculation galore. We don't know. We do know, and it was shown decisively with a multi-million-dollar win in civil court, that the FBI and the police conspired to hide facts here. Why would they do it?
Well, I think that they are supporters of big industry and big timber, and I think there is some collusion with the security forces and the needs and aspirations of the big timber companies and some of the higher-up agents within the FBI. Besides, on top of it, they just have a knee-jerk reaction to, radical activism. So they see it as a threat. It falls into some other they can't understand,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And it's a threat to them. They do see it as a threat.
And in fact, as we go on with the show, we'll let people know that this argument with the FBI does continue. We'll continue in just a moment here on In Deep Radio. I'm Angie Coiro with Mary Liz Thomson, who is the director of the show, and Karen Pickett, consultant to the show. We'll be right back.
Tomorrow there'll be more of us than there are today. We're that ragged, jagged, cutting edge, and we all say it's quitting time. It's quitting time. It's quitting time on that high-tech plantation. It's quitting time. It's quitting time on that old high-tech plantation. It's quitting time for good. It's quitting time. It's quitting time. It's quitting time on that high-tech plantation. along in the truck one day. There was a guy in the road right my way. I said, hey buddy, you better get yourself out of there. He said, I ain't gonna let you take them trees. Hey man, I gotta get to the mill with these. He said, over my dead body. Woo-wee, hell to the metal, boys. It's okay to be a burster.
More of the music from the film that we're discussing this hour, Who Bombed Judi Bari. I am sitting with Karen Pickett, who's consulted on the film, and we have on the line from Southern California the director of the film, Liz Thomson, who's a longtime activist herself and has not only continued to make films, has a number to her credit before this, but also continues to blog on environmental work. You'll find it at Alternate as well as some other outlets. We were talking right before the break as to what the motivation of the FBI might have been. Karen, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the question that you asked, why would they suppress facts? Why would they try and hide facts? That is the question, isn't it? Because it's, besides the fact that the who the bomber is an unanswered question, that's also an unanswered question. And they tried to stop Judy's deposition from happening because they knew that she was about to die. And they kept stonewalling and stonewalling and stonewalling. And what you don't see in the recording of her deposition is every single question that her attorney, Dennis Cunningham, asked her, they objected to. And all those I objects were edited out. But they tried to stop it, and then when Dennis finished questioning her, they didn't have any questions directly for her. Why are they running cover for the bomber up until today? I think that in order to figure out the agenda there, one can look to history in other radical movements, the Black Panther Party, the American Indian Movement, who have been targets of FBI COINTELPRO operations, it's counterintelligence operations, where they set out to disrupt and destroy radical political...
Neutralize was the word that came up.
Yes.
The word neutralize. Mary Liz, you had that in close-up on the screen so we could understand that neutralize, and as clarified by some commentary right after that, neutralize is left pretty darn neutral. I mean, pretty much people are allowed to interpret that as to, what do you mean when the FBI tells you it's okay to neutralize somebody?
Yeah, and that was in their own memos of what they would tell their agents, and then it was left to them to, okay, I'll come up with some way to do that. The practice, and Karen is right, I mean, there's a lot to the history of COINTELPRO and J. Edgar Hoover and the impact of the FBI being kind of a political police and also in collusion with industry, to protect whatever they see as their profits, a threat, or, things like that. And I think that's the history of it came to play here as well as specific relationships. There were the head of security at Louisiana Pacific was friends with Frank Doyle, a key FBI agent, and so there were actually some direct relationships as well.
Well, and there's also a link here to COINTELPRO and the Black Panthers that Karen just alluded to. Richard Held from the FBI is featured in your movie. His first appearance is disarmingly calm. He looks like a man who's going to state the facts. We're going to investigate. We're going to gather information. And it turns out that this man is, for one thing, largely responsible for Geronimo Pratt having spent over a decade in prison for something he didn't do. Tell us about Richard Held, Mary Liz.
Well, and Geronimo Pratt also won $4 million. So there, just so people know, there was something there. He really was in jail that long he was an innocent man.
Richard Held got involved in this. How and what direct actions did he take in the investigation?
He was the head of the San Francisco FBI unit at that time, and so he was directly involved immediately, and he was speaking to the press about it. He wrote even letters to the editor. He was directly involved, so the first lawsuit directly named him, and the judge on the case took him out of the case, so she took out the kind of higher-ups, but he originally was one of the named defendants in the lawsuit.
I think he like J. Edgar Hoover, was very careful to shield himself, and some of those guys get very good at it, and their minions do some of that work for them as well. But that's why we went into discussion actually with people in the Black Panther Party and in the American Indian Movement. Actually, John Trudell spoke at Judy's memorial. And we we built a lot of bridges. These were movements that we already supported, but because suddenly something far worse than anything we imagined would happen, we didn't think we would be attacked with lethal force like the Black Panthers and the American Indian Movement and the Puerto Rican Independentistas had been, and we were. So it really was up to us to reach out to these other movements and say, we understand there's a lot of solidarity here, and this is how we figure things out is we talk together and we look at these patterns of what's happened to other activist groups.
Mary Liz, there's a certain sweet naivete when you see some of the stock footage we just discussed earlier, archival footage more accurately, with the Earth Firsters, gleefully climbing up some dirt right in front of a bulldozer or standing in front of a truck with smiles on their faces, knowing that truck is going to stop. And as we've learned with other protest actions since then, the bulldozer doesn't always stop, the truck doesn't always stop, and sometimes people do shoot. Do you think that era is over for the Earth Firsters, that almost casual, sweet saying, it's okay, that's a human being behind that wheel, he's going to stop?
Yeah, I do. I think that sort of the innocence of that might be over, but now it's not completely gone. It's you have to call it on a situation by situation basis, and be much more aware of the actual tensions going on either way, and trying to manage the escalation of tensions that would lead to that, or make it really clear what you're doing and things like that. And there's just a way more complex awareness, maybe, which I think that you see in our movie as well. When they do first start out in Coiro, the police are also, they're not quite sure what to do when people are blocking the road, and they are asking, and they're told, wait till the song is over, and they go, okay, and they're really not quite sure what to do. But their response also evolves. And so we're also dealing with a way more evolved police state right now, especially any activist who wants to do, creative protests and actions. And we have a right to do that, but we have to reclaim that kind of space in a way. And so I think that I was inspired how creative the things were that Daryl and Judi, and especially their music and things like that they did. So I think that that's a huge part of the legacy, of remembering how that can... It also, not only is it helpful, but it helps de-escalate the tensions.
Well, let's talk about what the current situation is. I mean, this is a movie without an ending, and an ending to a movie called Who Bombed Judi Bari would be to find out who bombed Judi Bari. You can't really get the FBI's help to look into that because they have evidence in hand that they have been ordered by a judge to turn over for independent investigation. There might be DNA on another bomb that's being held. There are other reasons to look into this. And the FBI, in defiance of that court order, has not turned that information over. Karen, are you privy to any of the records of the FBI? What claim are they saying we won't turn this over, no reason given, or we won't turn this over because what reason are they giving?
Well, the reasons that they gave in court were really lame. They said, oh, this is contraband, and these things that fortunately the judge did not buy. But why they're fighting it so hard is, again, the burning question. Why would they? Why do they care? I think that we're going to get it, and the remaining evidence, and I think that we're going to get it soon, and that it will be in this independent forensics lab, because we've won against their appeals twice. Two judges have ruled in our favor, so I think we will get it, and not only. Will it help continue? The FBI closed the case many years ago. It's us, Daryl Cherney, and the rest of us who worked with Judi who have carried the investigative case on. And so we need the evidence. And, not only is it relevant because it's physical evidence, but there's technology that's available today that wasn't available back in 1990. The FBI didn't choose to use any technology to investigate, but
because it didn't fit their storyline,
right? But in any event, we have more tools available to us now, and also I think that the movie will help further the investigation, because the more people that are talking about this, and the more people that really understand the story and what happened, somebody knows who the bomber is.
A long time ago, by media standards, Mary Liz, a PBS movie was made, a PBS documentary, and that pointed a finger in an oblique sort of way at Judi Bari's first husband, Mike Sweeney. And there's not that much about that on the internet. Just that, the idea was out there. Judi Bari appears in footage in the film saying, "This is not accurate. That's not something." He couldn't do that and look me in the eye. Yeah. And then that was laid to rest. And are there any other likely candidates out there? Do you see Mike Sweeney as a likely candidate? Any ideas?
No, Mike Sweeney is not at all a likely candidate for several reasons. Most likely the bomb was probably planted in Oakland at the house she stayed at the night before, so it went off immediately upon driving that morning. It's sad that he's kind of been dragged into it. I don't think he really has anything to do with it, so it's just one of those side issues that got stirred up. But there's really nothing there. I've looked into it, so there's more likely there's an informant who was being used, who did know how to make bombs, who was robbing banks with bombs way back in the 80s, who could have been involved. There's lots of different threads of evidence of people who were informants within Earth First, and there's more leads there that are likely. It's just that we really do need more evidence, and we need it tested. So, unfortunately, there's not much further to go until we get more of that.
Karen, what about the person who sent a note from the Lord's Avenger and seemed to know something about how the bomb was put together? Do I understand correctly the FBI did not follow that up?
Well, they didn't really pursue it. It was a very bizarre incident, but it was one in the series of an entire summer of really bizarre incidents. There kept being these 6-inch headlines: the nails match, the Lord's Avengers letter, and how many of those stories were planted by the police agencies, or somehow or other were part of the campaign of disruption is, we can't say for sure, but the Lord's Avenger letter was very bizarre. However, it did contain details about what was in the bomb and this other bomb that we believe was built by the same person, that was at a logging mill, Louisiana Pacific mill. And there were details about both bombs that nobody else except the bomb builder would know. So there's something there, but who wrote the Lord's Avenger letter? And, like Judy said, when it came out, it was frightening. It was very bizarre. But what Judy said at the time is, well, now somebody is confessing to this crime. Maybe now they'll finally, turn their sights away from myself and Daryl. But then they said maybe a colleague of Judy's could have written the letter. It was just absurd.
It does pile absurdity on absurdity. But Mary Liz, toward the end of the movie, you put in a really chilling segment about a car bombing exercise that was performed in the week before that bomb went off. And the footage of the car that was blown up in the quote-unquote bombing exercise and the still pictures of the car that Judi Bari was in, that Judy and Daryl were in, are astoundingly similar. Astoundingly similar.
Well, what they did, some of the footage that I used to show that is what the FBI did after the actual bombing. They did for the trial. They blew up some cars to show what it would look like, and that's their own footage from that. So, but what the cars they actually blew up in their actual bomb school right before that, I don't have actual footage of that.
Well, there was footage of that was mysteriously damaged.
So that footage that is what they gave in evidence at the actual crime scene the day of the bombing. The FBI themselves filmed it themselves, and they do have on their own videotape, which they handed over in discovery, but they tried to damage it as much as they could, and you can't hear it very well. But it is Frank Doyle. Daryl and I have watched him on The Mythbusters. He's on that show and listened over and over again to his voice. And this is his voice. He was a teacher at the FBI's own bomb school. They did on Louisiana Pacific Timberland a few weeks before the actual car bombing of Daryl Cherney and Judi Bari. And his voice is at the crime scene saying to his students, well, there it is. This is the final exam. So yeah.
That's really disturbing. Karen, your involvement with the film, you worked as a consultant. You're doing some promotional work for the film now as well. Does this bring you any, I hate the word closure. There's no closure here, but what has this done for you as a person trying to get this story out?
Well, and I wouldn't so much say closure as it's brought the whole thing alive again, and it's an extremely important story, and there's a whole new context to talk about it, and I am very excited that it has now passed into the public realm after it premiered on March 2nd, because we can really use it as a tool to talk about the FBI's counterintelligence programs, to talk about, another parallel with Occupy is local police agencies getting their marching orders from the feds. With Occupy, it's Homeland Security. With Earth First, back then, it was the FBI in Washington, D.C., pulling the strings of the Oakland police. So it allows us to talk about these things in a more intelligent and strategic manner is what I would hope, and there's so much. It brings Judi's writings back. She wrote a booklet called Revolutionary Ecology, and all of her writings about working with labor, and these are all tools. These are all strategic tools, and so it brings it back into the realm of the current, and we can use it in our organizing.
Mary Liz, for you, it's brought many kudos as a director. Your personal connection to this, I'd love to hear about it. We have just about a minute.
Well, I'm so excited that the story and Judi, who she was, and what all the Redwood activists have done is getting out there in a way that people can relate to, hopefully on an emotional level, and feel connected to it, and be part of the stories that we're all looking to today for change in how we deal with our environment and how we deal with each other and respect that we have. So I'm hoping to contribute to that, and I'm so happy to be getting it out there.
And I'm happy you had time to spend with us and tell us about it. Thanks for a great movie. Mary Liz Thomson, good luck to you.
Thank you.
And Karen, it's good to meet you, and thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You can find out more about them and their movie at whobombedjudibari.com. If you forget that, you can go to indeepradio.com. We have all our links from this show there, plus some web extras that we've taped this week as well. It's a wrap. Our executive producer is Gordon Whiting. Our engineer is Matt Fiddler. Assistant producer is Cindy Myers. Jill Fiddler runs everything else. And our incredible interns are Forrest Phillips, Kristen Stevens, and Megan Mena. Our theme is by Big Troubles. David Gans is singing in the background with our closing theme. Visit our website for extras from, as I mentioned, Gotta Laugh and more. We will see you next week. Thanks for listening. I'm Angie Coiro. Thanks for tuning in this week to In Deep with Angie Coiro, a production of TalkBack Studios. You can get more information about us at indeepradio.com. And while you're there, you can become a member and support our work. There's a link there to contact us, too, with any questions or feedback. We're developing a series on mental health issues in our country, especially in this economy, and we'd love to have you be part of that. Please send us your topic suggestions, your stories, and your questions through our website. Click the contact button at indeepradio.com. Join us again this time next week for 2 more hours of in-depth conversation. I'm Angie Coiro. We'll see you then. You're listening to WPWC 1480 AM, Dumfries, Virginia. We Act Radio, home of Washington's progressive working community.